Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're focusing on something super important, especially for those of you out there on the front lines at pregnancy centers across the U.S.
Yeah,
You know, those folks doing that amazing, life-changing work supporting families and individuals
right.
facing unplanned pregnancies.
Absolutely. These centers are really pillars of their communities. And what's inspiring is they're seeing a growing demand for their services each year.
Yeah,
Really speaks to the vital role they play.
it absolutely does. But with that growing demand comes, you guessed it, a whole new world of risks and challenges. And that's what we're diving deep into today, risk management and insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and how pregnancy centers like yours can safeguard their incredible mission in a world that, let's face it, seems to get more complicated by the day.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We're going to uncover some risks that might even surprise you. Everything from the potential legal pitfalls of providing medical services and counseling to the digital threats lurking in the shadows like cyber attacks.
Yeah.
And yes, even the potential for personal liability for board members, which is something a lot of people don't realize.
Okay, I have to admit the personal liability thing definitely caught my attention.
Yeah,
But let's rewind for a second and start with the heart of what many pregnancy centers do.
sure.
Providing essential services like pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, counseling, and referrals. These are the cornerstones, right?
Absolutely. And it's precisely because of these services that professional liability becomes a major consideration.
Okay.
It's like thinking you're sailing in calm waters and then bam, a rogue wave.
Whoa.
Even a routine pregnancy test could lead to a malpractice claim if there's a misdiagnosis or a perceived error in how the test was administered. It's more common than you might think.
That makes me think about those what could possibly go wrong videos. You know, the ones where a simple task turns into a disaster. It's a good reminder that even seemingly straightforward procedures need careful attention.
Exactly. And don't forget the power of words.
Oh, right.
Counseling is such a vital part of what these centers do, offering guidance and support during what can be an incredibly emotional time, but even the most well-intentioned advice,
Sure.
if not documented properly, could be misconstrued and lead to potential claims. Down the line documentation is like your safety net in these situations.
So we're talking about covering your bases on multiple fronts.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about potential lawsuits from clients, right? There's this whole other layer of risk related to data privacy and confidentiality.
You're right on the money. HIPAA and confidentiality risks are absolutely critical to consider.
Yeah,
Think about it. These centers are dealing with incredibly sensitive client information,
right.
often at a very vulnerable point in their lives. A data breach or even just a careless disclosure could have serious repercussions legally and ethically.
It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. One small slip-up could have a ripple effect. So we've got potential exposures related to the core services these centers provide, but then there are the general liability risks that pretty much any organization has to grapple with, right?
Right.
Those everyday things that could happen anywhere.
Exactly. Take premises liability, for example. A visitor slips and falls on a wet floor, trips on a rug, or, heaven forbid, encounters a faulty handrail on the stairs.
Oh, gosh.
These things happen, and suddenly you're facing a lawsuit, regular maintenance, and those often overlooked safety protocols.
Yeah.
They're not just suggestions, they're essential.
You know, it's funny because you mentioned safety protocols, and I immediately thought about those wet floor signs.
Uh-huh.
They might seem mundane, but they're actually a critical part of preventing accidents and, as you said, potential lawsuits. It's all about mitigating risk.
Precisely. And in today's world where everything seems to end up online, we can't forget about advertising liability. Think about it.
Hmm.
Anything you put out there, from brochures to social media posts, could be taken out of context, misinterpreted,
Oh, yeah.
or even twisted into something it's not. Pregnancy centers need to be incredibly mindful about their messaging and how they present themselves to the public. It's a delicate balance.
It really is, especially in today's media landscape. Speaking of people and how things can get complicated,
Right.
I know many pregnancy centers rely heavily on volunteers,
Yeah,
which is incredible from a community standpoint,
absolutely.
but it also brings its own set of challenges from a risk management perspective, doesn't it?
You've hit on a really important point. Volunteers are the lifeblood of many pregnancy centers, and their dedication is truly remarkable, but managing volunteers effectively
Yeah.
requires clear guidelines, thorough training, and I can't emphasize this enough, adequate supervision. It's not just about protecting the center, it's also about making sure the volunteers feel confident and prepared.
That's such a great point. Providing clear guidelines and training for volunteers not only helps manage risk for the center, but also ensures that the volunteers feel supported and equipped to do their important work. So it's a win-win. And all of this actually leads us quite smoothly into the topic of employment practices liability.
Right, and you're correct. It is a natural transition. This is where things can get a bit tricky.
Okay.
You're looking at potential claims related to discrimination, harassment, even wrongful termination, and this area gets particularly sensitive for faith-based pregnancy centers,
Mm-hmm.
which might have specific hiring practices or policies related to their religious beliefs. Navigating this requires clear, legally sound policies and procedures,
Yeah.
all while ensuring the center's values are upheld. It's about finding that delicate balance.
It sounds like it's about being proactive and thoughtful about these policies,
Yes,
not just slapping something together and hoping for the best.
exactly.
And then, of course, there's the extremely sensitive and unfortunately very real topic of abuse and molestation risks. I imagine this is something that keeps many pregnancy center leaders up at night.
You're absolutely right. Given the vulnerable populations these centers serve, this is not something we can shy away from. Rigorous background checks for all staff and volunteers are non-negotiable.
Yeah,
And it goes beyond just checking boxes.
right.
Comprehensive training programs are vital. Everyone needs to be equipped to recognize the signs of abuse, know how to respond appropriately, and understand the mandatory reporting requirements in their state. Creating a culture of safety and vigilance is paramount.
It sounds like it's about being proactive on multiple fronts, from background checks and training to creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to speak up if they see something concerning.
Exactly. You want to create an environment where everyone feels empowered to advocate for the safety and well-being of those the center serves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already, from professional liability and those everyday slip and fall risks to the complexities of managing volunteers and the critical importance of addressing potential abuse and molestation risks. Let's take a deep breath and shift gears a bit. What about the physical assets of a pregnancy center? I'm talking about the building itself, the equipment, all the things that allow the center to operate. What kind of risks do they face?
You're absolutely right to bring this up. The physical space and the resources within it are essential to a pregnancy center's ability to function.
Yeah.
So let's start with the elephant in the room, property and business interruption.
Okay.
Imagine the devastation a fire, a natural disaster, or even a burst pipe could have on a center's ability to serve its community. It's not just about repairing the damage. It's about the potential loss of income and the disruption of services during the recovery period.
It's like that domino effect. One event can trigger a whole cascade of consequences. So property insurance is essential.
Right.
But it sounds like there's more to the story.
You're right. There's an often overlooked risk related to the very equipment that allows these centers to provide their services.
Okay.
We're talking about equipment breakdown coverage. Imagine an ultrasound machine malfunctioning. It could disrupt services, lead to delays in care, and even result in significant repair or replacement costs. And it's not just about ultrasounds. Think about the heating and cooling systems, computers, security systems. All these things are crucial to the day-to-day operations of a pregnancy center.
It makes you realize how much we rely on these seemingly invisible systems until something goes wrong. So equipment breakdown coverage is like having a backup generator for your essential equipment. It helps keep things running smoothly even when the unexpected happens.
That's a great analogy. It's about peace of mind, knowing that if something critical breaks down, you've got a plan in place.
Okay, we've talked about property equipment, but there's this whole other realm that's become increasingly important in recent years. I'm talking about the digital world and the risks that come with it. Cyber liability is something I think we all hear about. But it can feel a bit abstract, especially for organizations that aren't primarily tech-focused.
It's true, cyber liability is often seen as something that only affects big corporations or tech companies, but the reality is that any organization that stores or handles sensitive data is a potential target.
Yeah.
And for pregnancy centers, that data is incredibly personal and sensitive. We're talking about client names, contact information, medical histories,
Right.
even deeply personal stories shared during counseling sessions. It's a treasure trove for cyber criminals.
That's a sobering thought. So we're not just talking about someone hacking into a bank account. We're talking about potentially exposing vulnerable individuals to identity theft, harassment, even public shaming. The consequences could be devastating.
You're absolutely right. And it's not just about external threats either. Sometimes the biggest vulnerabilities come from within, whether it's a well-meaning staff member clicking on a phishing link or outdated software that leaves the network open to attack.
Can you give us an example of what a cyber attack might look like for a pregnancy center? Paint a picture for us.
Absolutely imagine this. A staff member receives an email that looks like it's from a trusted donor, maybe even someone they've corresponded with before the email seems urgent, asking them to update their payment information or confirm a donation.
Oh, wow.
The link looks legitimate, but it actually leads to a fake website designed to steal their login credentials or install malware on the center's network. That's a classic phishing attack, and it's more common than you think.
Wow, that's scary because it seems so easy to fall prey to something like that. I mean, we're all bombarded with emails every day.
Right.
And it's easy to let your guard down.
Exactly, and that's why staff training is so crucial. It's about equipping everyone with the knowledge and skills to recognize these threats and avoid becoming a victim.
So we've got professional liability, general liability, employment practices, liability, property coverage, equipment breakdown coverage, and now cyber liability. It's a lot to keep track of. Is there anything else pregnancy centers need to have on their radar?
Well, many pregnancy centers use vehicles, whether it's for transporting clients, providing mobile services, or even just running errands. This means they need to consider commercial auto insurance, even if the vehicles are owned by employees or volunteers and used for center-related activities.
Oh, that makes sense. It's about making sure everyone is protected, whether they're driving a company van or using their personal car for center business. And speaking of protection, we can't forget about the people in leadership roles. I know from my experience on various boards that directors and officers can face a lot of personal liability decisions made at the top can have a ripple effect throughout the organization.
You're absolutely right. Decisions made by board members and executives can have a significant impact on the organization, and they can be held personally liable for those decisions, even if they were made with the best of intentions. Directors and officers, liability insurance or D&O insurance is crucial to protect these individuals and, by extension, ensure the continued stability of the organization. It's like a shield that protects those at the helm from personal financial ruin if something goes wrong.
So we're talking about protecting not just the organization's assets, but also the personal assets of those who volunteer their time and expertise to lead it. It makes you realize how important this type of coverage is, especially in today's litigious society.
Exactly. And it's not just about lawsuits. It's about protecting the reputation and peace of mind of those who dedicate themselves to serving their communities.
So we've covered a lot of ground when it comes to insurance needs, but I want to shift gears a bit and talk about something you mentioned earlier, proactive risk management. It's one thing to have insurance policies in place, but it's another thing altogether to take steps to prevent those risks from materializing in the first place, right?
You're absolutely right. Insurance is a crucial part of the equation, but it's not the whole story. Think of it like this: insurance is your safety net if you fall. But proactive risk management is like building a sturdy fence around the edge of the cliff to prevent the fall from happening in the first place.
I love that analogy. So where do we start? What are some of the key areas pregnancy centers should focus on when it comes to proactive risk management?
Well, given the reliance on volunteers, I'd say that's a great place to begin. Thorough volunteer training, screening, and supervision are paramount.
Okay.
You want to ensure that everyone involved with the center understands their roles and responsibilities, as well as the potential liabilities. It's about empowering volunteers to feel confident and prepared while also protecting the center from unnecessary risks.
It's like providing volunteers with a roadmap so they know where they're going and how to get there safely. It makes everyone feel more secure and confident. Okay, so volunteer management is key. What else?
Security is another crucial area. We've already talked about cyber threats, but physical security is equally important. Think about things like surveillance cameras, secure record-keeping systems, and even basic things like good lighting and controlled access to the building.
Right, it's about creating a safe and secure environment for both the clients and the staff, and it probably deters potential criminal activity as well. You know, it's interesting because we often think of security in terms of preventing theft or vandalism, but it's also about creating a sense of safety and well-being for everyone who walks through the doors. It's about making sure people feel protected and respected.
That's a really important point. The environment you create within a pregnancy center can have a profound impact on the people who come there for help. It's about fostering a sense of trust and security.
And speaking of trust, we touched on confidentiality earlier, but it's worth emphasizing again, these centers are dealing with incredibly sensitive information. And protecting that confidentiality is not just a legal obligation, it's an ethical imperative.
You're absolutely right. Client confidentiality is paramount. Pregnancy centers need to have clear policies in place, ensure their staff is properly trained, and make sure they're complying with all applicable state and federal privacy laws, including HIPAA, which specifically addresses the protection of health information.
It's about building a culture of confidentiality where everyone understands the importance of protecting sensitive information and treating it with the utmost respect.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space where clients feel comfortable sharing their stories and receiving the support they need without fear of judgment or exposure.
Okay, so we've got volunteer training, security measures, and confidentiality policies. What else should these centers be thinking about in terms of proactive risk management? What are some of the less obvious things that might not immediately come to mind?
One thing that often gets overlooked is the employee handbook.
Oh, the handbook.
It's essential to have a regularly updated handbook that clearly outlines policies and procedures related to employment practices, abuse prevention, professional conduct, and really anything that could potentially lead to a liability claim. It's like having a roadmap for everyone to follow, outlining the expectations and boundaries, and creating consistent consistency and transparency, which can go a long way in minimizing risk.
It sounds like it's not just about having a handbook. It's about making sure it's a living document that's regularly reviewed and updated to reflect changes in laws, best practices, and the evolving needs of the organization.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about staying ahead of the curve and making sure your policies and procedures are aligned with the current landscape.
So if we bring all this together, we're talking about a multifaceted approach to risk management.
Right.
It's about having the right insurance policies in place, but it's also about proactive measures like thorough volunteer training, robust security protocols, strict confidentiality practices, and clear, comprehensive employee handbooks. It's about creating a culture of safety, accountability, and respect.
That's a great summary, and it's important to remember that risk management isn't a one-time thing.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process that requires regular review and adaptation as the organization evolves and the landscape changes. It's about staying vigilant and proactive.
You're so right. The world is constantly changing, and new risks are emerging all the time. Pregnancy centers need to be vigilant and stay ahead of the curve. It's not just about protecting the organization from financial losses. It's about protecting their reputation, their mission, and ultimately the people they serve.
Absolutely. And it's not just about reacting to crises, it's about anticipating potential challenges and putting measures in place to prevent them from happening in the first place. It's about building a culture of resilience.
Well said, and I think that's a great segue into our final topic, the long-term consequences of underestimating risk. This is something that really resonated with me as we were prepping for this deep dive. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day operations and think, oh, that will never happen to us. But the reality is that risk is everywhere, and ignoring it can have far-reaching consequences.
It's a crucial point. Sometimes the most seemingly insignificant risks can have the most devastating consequences down the road. It's like a small crack in a foundation that, if left unaddressed, can eventually lead to the collapse of the entire structure.
Okay, so let's play this out. What might that look like for a pregnancy center? What are some of the potential long-term impacts of not taking risk management seriously? What's the worst-case scenario?
Well, think about a hypothetical scenario where a pregnancy center doesn't have adequate abuse and molestation coverage. If an incident were to occur, the financial repercussions could be crippling legal fees, settlement costs, reputational damage. It could potentially force the center to close its doors, leaving the community without those vital services.
Wow.
And it's not just about that one incident either. The ripple effects can be felt for years to come. It can impact the center's ability to attract and retain staff and volunteers. It can make it harder to secure funding and donations, and it can erode trust within the community, making it even more challenging to fulfill their mission.
It's like a snowball effect. One small oversight can trigger a chain reaction that has a lasting impact on the organization's ability to operate and fulfill its mission, so the stakes are high. We're not just talking about dollars and cents here. We're talking about the very survival of these organizations and their ability to provide essential services to vulnerable individuals and families.
You're absolutely right. And that's why risk management is so crucial. It's about protecting not just the organization's assets, but its very purpose and the people it serves.
And on that note, I think it's time to shift gears and talk about what listeners can do to assess their own risk profiles and ensure they have the right coverage in place. What are some practical steps pregnancy center leaders can take right now to start building a more resilient organization? All right, so we've explored all those potential pitfalls, but now let's talk solutions. For those listening who are thinking, okay, this all makes sense, but where do I even begin? What advice would you give to pregnancy center leadership about taking that first step towards better risk management?
Well, that's a question I get a lot, and my answer is always the same. Start with a comprehensive risk assessment. It's like getting a checkup for your organization's health. You need to know what potential problems are lurking before you can address them. This involves identifying all potential risks the center faces, both internal and external,
Yeah.
and then really digging deep to evaluate the likelihood and potential impact of each one.
So it's not just a quick glance, it's a
Right.
deep dive into the what if. It makes me think of those disaster preparedness checklists, the ones that make you think about every possible scenario, no matter how unlikely.
Exactly. It's about being thorough and thinking outside the box. Once you have a clear understanding of the risks, you can start developing strategies to mitigate them. And that's where tailored insurance solutions come in.
So insurance is like the armor you put on once you've identified the potential battlefields.
That's a great way to put it, but it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right.
You need to work with an experienced insurance broker who understands the unique needs of pregnancy centers and can help you create a customized insurance program that addresses your specific risks.
So finding a specialist in this area is key.
Yes.
Someone who gets the nuances of these types of organizations and the specific challenges they face.
Absolutely. Pregnancy centers aren't just another business. They have a unique mission and a set of values that need to be considered when developing a risk management plan. You need an insurance partner who understands those nuances and can provide the right coverage and guidance.
Well, I think our listeners are in luck because that's exactly what BDI insurance specializes in.
Absolutely.
They have a deep understanding of the risks pregnancy centers face and can help create a comprehensive risk management plan that includes tailored insurance solutions. They're like the superheroes of pregnancy center risk management.
I couldn't agree more. Their team has the expertise and experience to help you navigate the complexities of insurance and risk management, which can feel overwhelming,
Right.
allowing you to focus on what matters most, providing vital services to your community.
And I love that they take a holistic approach going beyond just insurance to help centers develop proactive risk management strategies. It's not just about protecting against financial loss, it's about building a culture of safety and resilience. It's about empowering pregnancy centers to not only survive but thrive in what can feel like a very challenging environment.
Well said. And for those listening, my advice is simple. Don't wait for something to happen before you take action.
Mm-hmm.
Risk management isn't about being reactive, it's about being proactive. It's about taking control and building a strong foundation for your organization.
So true. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are resources available to help you every step of the way. Reach out to the experts at BDI Insurance, get that risk assessment underway, and start building a stronger, safer future for your pregnancy center. Because at the end of the day, it's about ensuring that these vital organizations can continue to provide compassionate care and support to those who need it most.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.